Greetings, U.S. history. That's right, I'm not here, and so as a result I've left behind this beautiful time capsule for you to be doing notes today, because a day without U.S. history is a day without sunshine. That's what I always say. And a day without sunshine is nighttime. So, you've learned something. Now, what we're going to be doing today in this video is we're going to be talking about Roman numeral 9, inventors and inventions. Now, what you have to understand is you may not actually be there in the notes, because when I'm writing this or composing this, it is the far-off past of Tuesday, and you all are seeing this in the amazing space future that is no doubt Friday. So I'm going to have to guess where we are in the notes at this point. If you're not at Roman numeral 9 by this point, just leave some space in your notebook, page or two, and start here at Roman numeral 9. Yes, I recognize that this might mess up your notes somewhat, but there's really no point in whining, because you're in the future and I can't hear you here in the past. So, you're just going to have to deal with this. We're going to take notes today. We'll finish what we don't finish, what we need to get through. We'll finish off on Monday, or Tuesday, since Monday is a holiday. In any case, Tuesday, finish the notes. Your test is currently scheduled for Wednesday of next week. But we can always talk about that later. But again, that's the current plan. You're going to finish notes then on Tuesday, with a test to be found on Wednesday. So, with all that said and done, take out your notebooks. Roman numeral 9, you're looking at inventors and inventions, and then eventually we're getting into social and religious life as well. So, yeah, go ahead and take out your notebooks, and I'll amuse myself while you do that. Okay, that's probably enough time. And if it isn't, feel free to use the pause button or something else fun like that. So, where we pick up then, talking about, again, inventors and inventions. Before we go any further, you have to understand the difference between an invention and an innovation. An invention is a physical object, so a brand new creation. An innovation is a brand new idea. So invention is something physical, innovation is something mental. Innovations must predate inventions. Like, you can't build an object without first having the idea for the object, but not all innovations create inventions. For example, democracy was an innovation, but it doesn't have an object attached to it. There is no, box o democracy that you can pick up. Instead, it was just a concept. Capitalism, democracy, the internet, is an innovation. There are physical parts to it, but the concept itself does not necessarily create, again, an object. So, what we're talking about here are both inventors and innovators. So people who came up with new ideas, and also people who came up with new objects. Starting with the idea of the spirit of improvement. So how exactly are we going to change the country and make Americans better? Mercy Otis Warren is our first contestant. Mercy Otis Warren, it's a she. She was a playwright and an author, and a personal friend of George Washington. So playwright, author, friend of George Washington. Her big contribution is she wrote A History of the American Revolution. This is considered to be the first work of American history. So the History of the American Revolution, it's considered to be the first written down record of American history, the first historical book, which is significant for a number of reasons. It's the first time that we have a history book that's American and not English. And secondly, it's written in common parlance. It's written so that the average person can read it and understand it. Unlike most history books, which were only for the upper class and the educated, Mercy Otis Warren's work is designed so that the common person can also read and understand it. Because the idea was to make the average person more aware of the uniqueness of our story, of our history, and so forth. And again, make them proud to be Americans. So, History of the American Revolution. That's her book. Mercy Otis Warren, History of the American Revolution. Next up, Benjamin Rush. Benjamin Rush is a doctor and a scientist. His major contribution, again, medicine, his major contribution is the idea that mental problems had a physical connection, not a religious one. At this point in time, it was basically accepted that people who suffered from mental illness were basically possessed. That if you suffered, again, from things like depression, schizophrenia, mania, those were all because you had been possessed by Satan, or, Satan's helpers. Benjamin Rush is the first person that basically figures out that there actually can be mental issues related to physical trauma. Somebody maybe have damage to a frontal lobe or something like that. So he's the first one who suggests we treat psychiatric problems as a medical issue rather than a religious or moral issue. He's also credited with being the founder of the first American medical school. So again, Benjamin Rush, medicine, mental illness, medical school. That's him. Number 3, Benjamin Banneker. Banneker is an African-American writer, inventor, and mathematician. He has a lot of major contributions, but the one we're going to bring up is he's the one who maps out Washington, D.C., basically lines up everything and decides where a lot of the stuff's going to go, along with L'Enfant. But in addition, he also creates an almanac filled with a wealth of information about science, the weather, farming, and so forth. So Banneker's big contribution again is the almanac that he creates, and also again the map of DC. And finally, you've got Charles Willson Peale. Charles Willson Peale is an artist, and his big contribution is art that is for the people rather than the elite. If you go into a museum and you look at a lot of paintings from the 1800s and so forth, you're going to see a lot of rich people in their stuff. Because before the camera, that's really what art was for. It was a way of, hey, paint my stuff behind me because let's show everybody how awesome I am. Peale is considered to be one of the first American artists to really take a step away from that and instead paint things like the beauty of nature, the average person, and so forth, rather than just simply, again, a Polaroid from the 1800s. So those are some of your first innovators. There's also big changes in the field of education, starting with Noah Webster, who you've probably heard of before, Webster's Dictionary, which was a big thing before the internet came along and you all could just Google everything, but Noah Webster. Webster's big contribution is actually not so much the dictionary, although that's where his name is still most famous for, Webster's American Dictionary. His big thing was he created a uniform system of spelling and grammar. So again, Webster's big contribution is a uniform system of spelling and grammar. Again, a uniform system of spelling and grammar. His American Spelling Book, it was created in 1783. And again, basically what it did is it creates a common American definition for how to spell things, what words mean, and so forth. Because at this point in time, different states essentially had their own languages. And so he's creating a unified one instead. The actual dictionary that he creates isn't until 1820 something or other, 1823 I think it is, possibly later, 1828. Let's go 1828. Oh, maybe I had a little burp. Okay, sorry, we might have had a little burble there. In any case, what I was saying is 1828 might be the correct date. Well, the computer blew up there, lost my train of thought. Okay, Webster, American Spelling Book, Dictionary, that's what you need to know. Next one, Jedediah Morse. Jedediah Morse creates Geography Made Easy. Geography Made Easy, as you might guess, is a textbook all about geography. But again, the big thing here is he's making an American textbook. Just like with Mercy Otis Warren, this is significant because we were importing most of our textbooks from England. And of course, England has their own way of doing things and their own set of preferences and so forth. So Jedediah Morse is trying to give us independence in the education system by creating American textbooks and treating American children the way we want them to be educated and so forth. In general, education in the 1800s is being designed to create what they called Republican virtues. Republican virtues, by definition, are basically the skills that people need to keep the republic going. So again, Republican virtues are the skills that people will need to keep the republic going. Third time. Skills that people will need to keep the republic going. So, self-reliance, sacrifice, nationalism, patriotism. These are all things that we're trying to teach in the schools. So the goal is, again, to create young Americans rather than young Englishmen. We want to teach them about growing up in America and all the skills that they are going to need. Now, before you go on, there's one other thing you need to understand about education. Women are being educated in this period. But, for the most part, women's education is limited to practical knowledge of home economics. In other words, they are taught how to be cooks and tailors and mothers, not so much anything else. So they are getting educated, which is a step in the right direction, but they're still not getting the same education as everybody else. Right. This brings us to the Industrial Revolution. So, The spirit of improvement was all about improving our minds, improving our bodies. The Industrial Revolution is all about improving industry and improving our economy. The revolution started over in England with the creation of the factory system. The factory system works in that you grow a crop next to a factory, which is next to the market. Again, crop next to factory next to market. By putting all three things essentially near each other, you're making things much more efficient. So you grow the field of cotton next to the cloth factory next to where you're going to be selling it. Or again, you raise the animals next to the slaughterhouse next to the market. By sort of putting everything together, it speeds the process up, and it helps to create a more efficient and much more cost-productive system. In America, some of the inventions that are happening during the Industrial Revolution that are particularly significant. James Watt. James Watt is believed to be the person who creates the first steam engine, which is the first major invention of the Industrial Revolution. Watt, again, creates the steam engine, considered to be the first one. This would be why we measure electricity in watts, among other things. So Watt creates the first steam engine. Originally, the steam engine was just used to drain water out of mine shafts. It isn't until later that they figure out you can use it to do other things as well. So Watt's invention is just one example of the Industrial Revolution. Now, the English were very protective of the Industrial Revolution. They didn't want anyone else to know what they were doing because, of course, they didn't want anyone else to steal their thunder. But immigrants out of England brought it to the United States and to other countries as well. Samuel Slater, for example. Samuel Slater was an English immigrant who gets the credit usually for bringing the Industrial Revolution to America. He basically stole the inventions and brought them over with us in the hopes of making money. You had people like Oliver Evans. Oliver Evans basically created a mechanized flour mill using James Watt's invention and Samuel Slater's designs. He creates a flour mill that operates entirely by machine. So again, you're going towards machines to do everything rather than humans, which again is great for production, not so much for the people and their jobs, but still. The big American inventor during the Industrial Revolution is going to be Eli Whitney. Eli Whitney is the big inventor here with two big things, the interchangeable parts and cotton gin. Interchangeable parts is kind of what it sounds like. The idea behind interchangeable parts is you can take a machine and you can replace a part of it rather than having to get a brand new machine. Again, the idea behind interchangeable parts is you can take out parts of the machine without having to get a new machine. Again, interchangeable parts, the idea is you can take out parts of a machine rather than having to get a brand new machine. Think of it kind of like this. When your car has engine trouble, you don't have to buy a new car. They can fix the engine, repair the engine, take out the parts and put them in. On the other hand, like when your phone dies, Apple doesn't just give you, the new pieces you need. They want you to buy a new phone. Which one is going to be more cheaper and better for you in the long run? The interchangeable parts is much, much easier and much better in the long run because it means, again, that business owners and things don't have to constantly be buying new machines. They can just buy the new parts. Interchangeable parts also allows for machines to be reproduced much, much faster as well. Now, the other big thing that Eli Whitney is famous for is the cotton gin. The cotton gin for the record is basically short for engine. The actual name should be the cotton engine, but he was Southern, so you end up with cotton gin. The cotton gin is a machine that basically pulls the seeds out of the cotton much faster than you could ever do it by hand. With the cotton gin, cotton becomes the major industry of the American South because now we can produce cotton at such a pace that we can actually fulfill worldwide demand. And so American cotton becomes our main export to other countries and so forth. Downside is, cotton is a labor-intensive crop to grow, and so this does kick up the slave industry quite a bit as well, because we have to have more slaves in order to grow the cotton. So, now we finally get to the transportation revolution. James Watt, again, had the steam engine, but he wasn't the one who comes up with the idea of a steamboat. That would be Robert Fulton. Robert Fulton is the guy who takes the idea of the steam engine and applies it to transportation. He creates the steamboat with the Clermont. The Clermont is the first steamboat, and it's also the first boat that can travel upstream in the river, which was something that no boat really could do at that time. So you're traveling upriver now for the first time, which basically turns the rivers into the first interstate highways. Now the steamships can go up and down the river, which allows for a lot more transportation and a lot more goods changing hands and changing directions. However, of course, the inevitable problem with steamboats is they only work where there's water. So we have to come up with a way to increase the amount of water and water access in America. Hence why we start building canals. Over 3,000 miles of canals are produced during this period. So canals are all over the place. The biggest and most famous of which would be the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal connects Lake Erie to the Atlantic Ocean, essentially. And again, this is all done so that the steamships and so forth can transport goods much faster, much easier than you ever could by hand or by road. Now, despite this, rivers, again, are going to be the big source for transportation in terms of shipping and so forth, but the average person still travels by land, by roads. You're not, of course, at paved roads yet with concrete and so forth, but you are getting a new style of roads, which would be the corduroy road. The corduroy roads were basically cut trees. So you cut a tree in half and you lay the log out flat, and you line those up end to end to basically make roads that were better than dirt, because you won't sink into the mud on a corduroy road. But the corduroy roads are still pretty bad. They're lumpy, they rot, because again, it's an open tree exposed to the elements. But again, it's still a step in the right direction. A step further than that, you're starting to get into better roads, more paved roads, better protected roads. The ones that are better protected and so forth become toll roads, so you have to pay money in order to use them. Probably one of the most famous roads is going to be the Cumberland Road. Cumberland Road was from Maryland to Ohio, and because it was a toll road, you had to pay money to use it, but that money was then used towards the maintenance to keep it going. This is also the time period in America where you're going to see the first ever major railroad, the B&O Railroad, which would be the Baltimore-Ohio Railroad. It was also really awesome in Monopoly. But the B&O Railroad is considered to be one of the first major railroad systems in America, which allows, again, for the transportation of people and goods much faster than you ever could on the corduroy roads, or even, to a certain extent, by the steamships. The downside, of course, is just like with the steamships, you can't just put a train anywhere. There has to be railroad tracks. And at this point in time, there still isn't a lot of railroad tracks. But it's a step in the right direction. Okay, so that takes care of Roman numeral 9, talking about inventors and innovations. In just a few moments, we're going to be talking about Roman numeral 10 when we get into social and religious life. So, again, feel free to rewind or do whatever you need to do, and then move on into Roman numeral 10. So, bye-bye.